Next up, a tune that's sure to get you in the mood for dependable auto and home coverage.
I don't want insurance providers. I have insurance. I have insurance. Insurance. I pay for service like you, and I know they'll be there for you too.
Gets me every time. Visit AAA.com/insurance and save up to 20%. Goodbye, insurance. Hello.
Insurance.
Hey everybody, it's Scott. Before we get to today's Browns Training Camp podcast, I wanted to remind you about Football Insider. Now, it's really a great way to get in-depth coverage of the Browns during what I think everybody expects to be a really big season. A subscription gives you texts sent right to your phone from me, Dan, Mary Kay, and Ellis with updates and breaking news about the Browns, not just in training camp, but throughout the season. The subscription also gives you access to all that exclusive content you see on Cleveland.com. A lot of it's free, but quite a bit requires a Football Insider subscription to access it. You also get our daily newsletter, which includes content that only subscribers get. So go to cleveland.com/Browns, click on the blue banner at the top of the page, and get signed up. All right, let's get to it. Here's today's Orange and Brown Talk podcast from Browns Training Camp.
Hey, what's going on, y'all? Ellis Williams for the Orange and Brown Talk podcast, day 11 of Browns training camp. I'm joined by Dan Labby, Scott Pascal, and Mary Kay Cabot. Before we get into what happened on the field, the Browns had two key defensive players added to the injury list today and not practicing. Mary Kay, what can you tell us about Denzel Ward and Myles Garrett?
Well, first of all, Myles Garrett is going to be day-to-day with a hamstring injury. Denzel is out with some soreness. Now, Denzel was in a bucket hat for each of the previous two practices, including the Orange and Brown scrimmage. Myles, on the other hand, practiced during the scrimmage. So he either did this hamstring during the scrimmage or it was kind of acting up on him a little bit before that. So those two guys join a growing list of guys on the injury list. And I have to say, there are a lot of guys right now that are either out or on their way back from injuries. And I think it's very significant. There could be as many as 9 new starters on this defense. And the Browns right now have a lot of significant guys, including Ronnie Harrison, Grant Delpit, Anthony Walker's just coming back, who are banged up. And the Kansas City Chiefs are only a month away.
Yeah, I hear you on that, Mary Kay. Dan, Scott, before we get into what happened on the practice field, I want your thoughts on these guys continuing to miss time. I mean, from the Ronnie Harrisons all the way now to just Denzel missing reps. Like, today was a gritty, warm day of practice. It would have been just, that type of practice where you would have loved to have your key players contributing and being in there grinding like a Jarvis Landry, who we're going to get to later. So I'll throw it to you guys, just your initial thoughts when you see this injury list growing for the Browns.
Yeah, I wrote down 10 guys on the bikes today. Some of them were like normal days off. Others are injured guys. But when I look at kind of the list, I'm not super concerned about a guy like Myles, because like Myles is going to show up and do what he does week one. There's not a whole lot that changes for him necessarily. Some little nuances here and there. Even Denzel, as long as he's healthy and get some practices in, I think he'll be okay. But if you have Ronnie Harrison and Grant Delpit on the sideline, that hurts, because those two guys are competing, obviously, for starting time. We've talked about this 3 safety thing forever, and now 2 of those 3 guys are on the bikes and not practicing. And it's been a little while for Ronnie Harrison, and he needs to get out there. You want to get him on the field, especially if Delpit's going to be a little while longer. So to me, those 2 guys are really the big ones that I look at and say, one of these guys has got to get back soon. Or then you start to worry a little bit, because unless this Myles thing lingers, unless this Denzel thing lingers, and it could for both of those guys, given their histories, but unless it lingers, I think those guys will be able to get on the field and be okay without a whole lot of work, but those safeties make me a little nervous.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Like, linebackers and safeties, I think, are the 2 positions where they really need to have the right guys out there, because you're talking about communication between those players. And like you said, Denzel, you're not so worried about him. He's a veteran, and I think everybody kind of understands what he can do. And I think it's good that John Johnson has been on the field with how important he's going to be at the back end. But you're right, like Harrison, and especially Delpit, just to kind of figure out how exactly he fits. We still don't know exactly how he fits into this defense. and how really they want to use him. So yeah, definitely. I think safeties, linebackers. It was good to see Anthony Walker kind of do some individual stuff today. But beyond that, I guess I wouldn't be too worried about Miles or like I said, Denzel.
Scott, before we get into our observations on the Browns using 2 or 3 safeties, listeners, if you're hearing some rain coming down, that is because we are now getting quite downpoured in this Berea parking lot. We avoided rain all day today at practice, but there's something about us hitting the record button, which then equals complete downpour. So we're going to huddle in here we're in Scott's, the back of a van here, kind of, in the trunk area, and we're just going to keep talking Browns football. So Scott, you and I, we made a remark to each other walking away from interviews today, just trying to observe or try to remember as we've seen 3 safeties on the field during practice. And we didn't really come to the conclusion whether it was vanilla or injury related. It seems like they're kind of just running out of time to especially get someone like Grant Delpit on the field and implement this.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I guess we thought we'd see some of that by now, but let's remember they're only going into their first preseason game, and even though there's only 3, there is still that extra week in there where there would have been a 4th preseason game before they actually start the regular season. So I wouldn't say they're running out of time, but I mean even Sheldrick Redwine has dealt with injury so far. So that safety group has been dealing with some issues, and it's a really important group of guys because we saw how many issues came up with safeties last season, and you really want to get your frontline guys, especially, on the same page.
Hey, you guys, I forgot to mention too, the fact that, we watched Malik McDowell leave the scrimmage with an oblique injury. And when I wrote this column today about all these different injuries, I added him in there, but that didn't even include another guy walked off today in rookie defensive tackle Marvin Wilson. So once again, it just little by little, these injuries keep piling up, and like you guys mentioned, they're going to be okay. I mean, Miles doesn't need a lot of practice, but still, it's the notion, it's the idea of continuity on this defense is what they need. They need, Anthony Walker out there calling the signals and directing traffic. You need John Johnson helping those other safeties figure out where to be and when. It's everybody pitching in and making sure that Greg Newsome is able to do what he needs to do. So I think it's just the whole collective lack of a practice with the defense, the full complement of defense.
On that same note with Anthony Walker, good news though for Joe Woods. He came back today, and again, when Walker is out there, you notice just a linebacker that can get sideline to sideline, and a guy who is vocal, like Mary Kay said, making those calls, and they really dodged a bullet, not losing him for an extended period of time and getting him back. Might be a silver lining, probably not the right term, but just a slight positive. And as you see, 2 other guys head to the bikes. Let's pivot here to practice. And Dan Lobby, you were all over this the last time we recorded in Berea, saying, I have a feeling that this Tuesday, Wednesday sweet spot for some grittiness with potential fisticuffs. We didn't see any fights that we know of today, Dan, but you want to maybe take a little victory lap and just tell us how you had such great intuition knowing that the Browns are going to be at each other's throats today.
You're just around camp long enough and start to get that sense of it's getting hot. These guys are tired of hitting each other. It gets chippy, and we really saw that today. It got really chippy out there. There was a lot of trash talk. Even Baker got hit a little bit by Jacob Phillips, and there was some back and forth there. There was a defensive lineman who was getting a little upset that he was getting hit over and over again. We saw J.C. Treader get mixed up and actually had to ask out of a few plays. So it got rough out there today, to the point where Kevin Stefanski stepped in, and we can't quote him verbatim what he said during practice, but he had to step in and kind of just tell everybody protect each other. The gist of it, protect each other, stay up, and he was sensing it too, I think, and just that combination of feels like it's in the 90s out there. These guys are sick of each other a little bit. We're getting into that first preseason game, so competition is going to ramp up on the bottom of the roster. this is kind of when you start to see it, I think.
Yeah, there was just a lot of lingering after the play, to discuss how I don't like what you just did, And the one that stood out to me was Jacob Phillips kind of bumping Baker a little too hard, maybe on a scramble. I mean, Baker didn't seem to mind. He kept running, but
we're all shopping for essentials online these days, and now you can get rewarded for it. With a Bank of America customized cash rewards credit card, you can choose to earn 3% cash back on online shopping. The essentials have never felt more rewarding. Visit bankofamerica.com/more rewarding to apply now. Copyright 2021 Bank of America Corporation.
Hi, this is Benjamin from the UK true crime podcast, They Walk Among Us. Brought to you by AMC Networks, Shudder is a premium streaming experience that provides a multi-sensory dive into fantastical worlds, offering the very best of old and new horror. Discover films and series that covers the entire horror spectrum, including highly anticipated new releases like The Boy Behind the Door and Psycho Gorman, to giants of the horror genre like The Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Halloween. What's more, you can watch one of my all-time favourite films, Mandy, a spiralling, surreal, bloody journey of revenge with visuals that are simply mind-blowing. Exceptional originals, movies, TV series and live events, there's always something new and unexpected for Shudder members to experience. Sign up at shudder.com.
Jarvis Landry was really quick to come out and let Phillips know that probably wasn't appropriate.
What this means, you guys, is time for this football team to hit training camp and that first preseason game. Those are the dog days of summer. As you guys mentioned, it gets incredibly hot. It was very humid out there today. Everybody's a little bit tired. It's time to change it up a little bit. It's time for the first preseason game. And again, fortunately for them, that's coming very soon. They only have 2 more practices now before they get to that first preseason game. And then it starts to go kind of quickly. Then from the first preseason game until they win the Super Bowl, it's all going to go, very, very fast. But just getting to this point, it gets chippy, like you guys said.
Hey, it's Dan, and before we get back to the podcast, let me tell you about our virtual Orange and Brown season kickoff event taking place on Wednesday, September 1st from 6:30 to 8 o'clock p.m. You can join Mary Kay Cabot, Scott Patsko, Ellis Williams, Doug Lamerise, Terry Pluto, and me. We'll have in-depth discussions on the team, analysis, a live auction, and even some surprise cameos. Tickets for the event are free, and they can be reserved through the link in the bio of this podcast, or the description of this podcast, I should say. There's also a VIP experience. Enter for a chance to win tickets to a special smaller group VIP experience with Browns alumni players and Cleveland.com sports writers. There's only 150 tickets available for this special experience, so to enter the ticket sweepstakes, again, go to that link in the description of this podcast to enter. Again, that's our Orange and Brown virtual season kickoff event on Wednesday, September 1st from 6:30 to 8 p.m.
Yeah, and speaking of that chippiness, I just want to pass it around and let's shout out some players we saw who brought that chippiness today, who brought that fire. And I'll start. I had my eyes on Jarvis Landry, and he's a guy who, Scott mentioned when Baker took a little bump from Jacob Phillips, he was on Jacob right away, and not in a rude way or a heavy way, just in a leader checking a younger player type of way, and that saying, we don't need that. And then early in a team session, Jarvis took a screen pass to the house, which isn't something you don't see often with this team, but there's a good likelihood he scored, and he was John with some defenders down the field and really kept talking to just himself after the play as he was walking off the sideline, even, was letting the ref know no one would have caught him. He really had that competitive energy, and it's almost like Kevin Stefanski predicted it, injected a little extra into Jarvis today, because when Kevin spoke, he was asked, what makes Jarvis such a great route runner, because Greg Newsome shouted out Jarvis for being such a great route runner. And Kevin started with Jarvis's competitiveness. And that's exactly what I saw today from start to finish, whether it's him catching a screen ball, a deep crossing route, or run blocking. He was getting in the mix today and led both verbally and by example, bringing that grit and that tenacity, as we know Jarvis does. But it's just a reminder that he's not going anywhere and remains a steady leader.
I mean, this is the kind of practice Jarvis loves.
Yeah.
Just his competitive. Like, we're going to get after each other. We're going to talk crap from the sidelines. That's the stuff that Jarvis just eats up. And it felt like he was locked in today from the start. And it just really got him going. You mentioned the play where he went to the house and was talking the whole way and the whole way back up the sideline. They were barking at corners that were lined up against receivers in front of them. It was just, this is when Jarvis Landry thrives in these competitive environments. Sometimes a little too much. He's been caught up with some taunting calls, and I actually saw the NFL sent out their officiating video today, and he's actually in the taunting section. One of his plays is an example of what not to do. So Jarvis will get caught up in stuff like that sometimes. That's also the kind of stuff that sort of makes Jarvis go and makes him so valuable.
Was it the Giants play?
It was what play was it? No, it was the one he caught a ball against the Texans and kind of spiked it into the ground at the DB.
There's a few to pick from.
Yeah, I think just the way the receivers and the defensive backs in general, that's where a lot of the tension. It felt like it was there today. I think Jamarcus Bradley.
Yeah.
He had a catch right on the sideline, kind of reached out, and I can't remember who the defensive back was, but there was like a look back, then a look, and it's like you just got this feeling that if there's any more eye contact here, there's going to be words. And Kadarius Hodge also had a catch kind of down the sideline where he was kind of being vocal, running down for the touchdown. So, yeah, I think that's where that kind of originated. It seemed that those two groups today.
Yeah, and speaking of the DBs, Dan, you were watching Greg Newsome today, a guy who also talked. One thing on Greg Newsome, I mentioned his light Saquon Barkley like quads on an earlier podcast. This was my first time seeing him up close and personal, and it checks out. He's built like an impressive corner. Dan, aside from the quadriceps, what else did you see from Greg Newsome today?
I thought he looked good. Now, he wasn't out there every single time on team drills. He was on the sideline a couple of times, and Troy Hill worked on the outside. But he worked mostly on the outside in plays of Denzel Ward. Did do some slot work with kind of down the depth chart a little bit when like Ryan Switzer was out there and stuff like that. But in coverage, it looked like he was doing a good job mirroring guys. It looked like he was staying on guys. Some of the run fits, things like that, struggled a little bit. If he's going to play inside, he needs to get better at that. He got caught up in a wash a couple of times. There was one screenplay to Jarvis. I don't think it was the big screenplay. Actually, you know what? It was the big screenplay. Okay. He got caught up in the wash a little bit, and Jarvis was able to break free. So, stuff like that, he's got to get cleaned up. But just from a straight one-on-one coverage standpoint, he went against Jarvis, Peoples-Jones, Kadarius Hodge. It seemed like he was doing a pretty good job against all those guys.
And Kevin Stefanski talked today about how important it's going to be to cross-train Greg Newsome being able to play outside and in the slot. And he even joked today, if in dime, he can get in the box and get physical. So that all-around ability is something they're going to slowly bring Greg Newsome around for. But as we open this podcast with, injuries lay where they lay, he might be asked to fill that role a lot sooner. Scott, anything on Greg, or do you want to mention a guy you were watching?
Positionless football, right? They want to cross-train every position. They want their defensive tackles to be able to move outside, and they want their linebackers to play every position, and safeties come on down in the box and play in the slot. And I think, what they're doing with Greg Newsome is probably an extension of all that. And it's not going to be as wild as it is in basketball, but it's in the NFL, and that's kind of the thinking behind that.
A couple of things, you guys, about Greg Newsome. The dual role that they're trying to train him for, 60% outside, 40% in the slot. I think it's challenging for a rookie to have to try to divide your time like that. When I remember back to Denzel Ward, and he had an amazing camp as a rookie, there were at times you could just tell that he was going to go out there and just nail it and rock it right away as a rookie. But he focused mostly on the outside. So the cross training of Greg, you have to do it. You really have to do it, but, you have to wonder if that sometimes doesn't, get into his head a little bit, where he's just got a lot on his plate right now. I think he's smart enough to handle it, but, that's a little bit of a lot. The other thing is, when I look at the defensive backs, when I look at Greg, when I look at Greedy, all of them, one thing that they're not getting enough of this camp, and they're probably not going to get a lot of, and that's a player the caliber of an Odell Beckham Jr. I really wish that Odell could be participating a little bit more in team, because you want Greg Newsome going up against Odell Beckham Jr. He's going to have to see Tyreek Hill coming out here in about a month. And, you really want to get him ready for something like that. So I really wish that Odell could get on in there a little bit, but I think they're going to remain very conservative with him.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Mary Kay. I mean, we talk so much about what Jadeveon Clowney and Myles Garrett are doing for Jedrick Wills and Jack Conklin. Well, the opposite's happening for Greg Newsome or Greedy Williams. They're not getting that work against one of the NFL's finest receivers. And of course there's Jarvis Landry, but it's no secret that Jarvis and Odell are two very different receivers, despite having, elite ability in this league. Before we get out of here, I do want to mention Harrison Bryant. He talked today as well. I thought it was interesting, him admitting, and not that it's anything to hide, but just confirming, is probably a better word, that he put on some weight, 13 pounds. It was obvious when he got here, he just looked thicker, looked like that second year guy, much like how Jedrick Wills looks leaner, that baby fat, if you will, is gone. Harrison Bryant, again, is looking more and more like an NFL tight end. Then he came out and had another impressive deep reception from Case Keenum today. And I'll just start out there. Do we need to have some higher expectations for Harrison Bryant coming into this year, or is this going to be another thing where there's only so many footballs?
Well, two things. Number one, he does not look like an NFL tight end. He looks like a high school junior. There's like a Disney Channel show just waiting for him to play some high school kid who's like the captain of the football team. It's
neck down, Scott. Yes. That's my bad. That's my. Yes. I should have been more clear.
He lost the baby fat. He did not lose the baby face. Anyways, but number two, I think, you should have higher expectations because he showed some ability last season. He had a couple rough patches, but you want him to build off that. And the catches he made at the stadium yesterday are part of that. Being consistent from a blocking standpoint, obviously it's huge in this offense if you're a tight end, and that's part of it. But he's a big part of the fact that we consider, I think, the tight end position one of the strengths of this team. They got depth there, and he's a huge part of that.
Yeah, it's been good to see Brian come on the last few days. Start, really going back to Sunday in the stadium today, had another good day. And as much as we talk about this offense will probably be a little more open this year, the tight ends are still going to be important, and having multiple guys that you can run through there that can do different things and offer, different looks for the defense is really important. And for Bryant, I think he was asked if he hit the rookie wall last year. He didn't really say he did, but I feel like maybe he did. And he struggled a little bit hanging on to the football, had some fumbles that could have been costly down the stretch. So there's work to do, but it's good to see him make that kind of, you hope to see him make that jump year 1 to 2. And he's at least starting to trend that way.
I think you're seeing that with a lot of the second year guys. Obviously, we've seen it with Donovan Peoples-Jones, and we've talked about that all camp long. Now we're starting to see Harrison Bryant heat up. He had a little bit of a quiet early start to camp, but now he's kind of making his noise. Last summer, he was like the it guy. This summer, we didn't hear that much about him until the last couple of days, and now he's kind of putting himself back on the map a little bit. But again, taking that 25% jump that coaches like to see young guys take going into their second year. And really, I think we're kind of seeing it with most of last year's rookies.
Yeah, I completely agree, Mary Kay. This team through camp is showing that they continue to prioritize the education part of this game, the on-field application, and just teaching young players how to become pros, whether it's from the coaching staff or the amount of veterans on this team. It's clearly being soaked up by these young players. All right, y'all, before we get out of here, any predictions for Wednesday's practice? Is this heat, humidity, and anger finally going to boil over? Dan Lobby, what do you think?
Yes. I also want to point out, because every now and again we hear complaints about our audio here on the podcast during these camp pods, and I just want to point out, before you leave that review, before you tweet at us, I just want you to understand we're literally sitting in the parking lot with our computer on Scott's tailgate. I don't have my microphone today because my son, I think, took it out of my bag, and I shouldn't say my microphone because it's actually his microphone. So if you're going to leave a bad review, say, Dan, get your own microphone. We got car alarms going off. We got rain coming down. We're dealing with a lot here. Now, it could be worse. We could be out digging ditches or whatever, but I'm just saying, if you're going to leave that bad review about our sound, just it's a little bit of a break till we get on the train. See, right there. I mean,
all right.
I can't go out there and stop traffic.
You can't make this up. You know, the heat and humidity of practice got the best of some Browns today. And you know what? Mother Nature gave Cleveland.com its best shot today as well. So on that note, we're going to get out of here. For myself, Dan Lobby, Scott Patrick, Mary Kay Cabot, I'm Ellis Williams signing off from day 11 of Browns training camp in Berea. Until next time, y'all.
Acast powers some of the world's best podcasts. Here's a show we recommend.
Hey, true crime listeners. We're the hosts of True North True Crime, a uniquely Canadian crime podcast.
Today's fast-paced news cycle makes it common for a murder or a missing person case to fall quickly out of the headlines.
True North True Crime voices those stories that still need to be heard.
Each episode is a standalone deep dive into a case that has impacted a community in Canada.
With a fact-based and victim-centered approach, True North True Crime reports on murder investigations, trial outcomes, and the unique details of each missing persons case.
So if you're looking for a new podcast, listen and subscribe to True North True Crime wherever you listen to podcasts.
Acast recommends.